many years it took. Now we found the natural look. Many years it took us to get this natural look. Suddenly out of the blue, this thing has shot like something new. Everybody young and old going afro and telling the world, if you hear them, black is beautiful. Look at the glass. Black is beautiful. It's the texture of us. Lift your head like me. You have to wear the collar with dignity. How it go now? Black is beautiful. I said, let's sing it out loud. Black is beautiful. So I'm black and proud. It's high time that we get rid of that old slave mentality. Sing the chorus. Let me hear you. Sing it. It's quite important, simple though it seems. We have achieved what once was thought a dream. We have been imitating in the past. Now we have found our very own at last. No more hot coke to press the hair, and no more bleach cream to make us clear. Proudly I say, without pretext, no more inferiority complex, because we know that black is beautiful. Look at the glass. Black is beautiful. And the texture of us. Lift your head like me. You have to wear the collar with dignity. How it go now? Black is beautiful. So let's sing it along. Black is beautiful. So I'm black and proud. It's high time that we get rid of that old slave mentality. Sing it. Black is beautiful. Everybody sing it. Black is beautiful. Sing it. My brother, why do you deny the fact when someone says that you are black? Your skin is very clear, I do agree. But don't you know you're a black man just like me? There is no in-between in race. You've got to find your rightful place. Living a life no pretext shows your inferiority complex. Don't you know that? Black is beautiful. Look at the shine. Black is beautiful. It's yours, it's mine. Lift your head like me. You have to wear the collar with dignity. How it go down? Black is beautiful. I said, sing it out loud. Black is beautiful. So I'm black and proud. It's high time that we get rid of that old slave mentality. Higher. Black is beautiful. Black is beautiful. I hope you don't misunderstand me now. I'm not comparing us with anyone. I'm only saying that people that we are should never feel ourselves inferior. The Lord above who made the night and day has given both their equal parts to play. Now if you are on our side, open your mouth and sing it with pride. Let me hear you say, black is beautiful. Sing it out loud. Black is beautiful. Say, I'm black and proud. Lift your head like me. You have to wear the collar with dignity. How it go now? Black is beautiful. So let's sing it along. Black is beautiful. So I'm black and proud. It's high time that we get rid of that old slave mentality. Sing it. Black is beautiful. Everybody sing it. Black is beautiful. Sing it. My brother, why do you deny the fact when someone says that you are black? Your skin is very clear, I do agree. But don't you know you're a black man just like me? There is no in-between in race. You've got to find your rightful place. Living a life no pretext shows your inferiority complex. Don't you know that? Black is beautiful. Look at the shine. Black is beautiful. It's yours, it's mine. Lift your head like me. You have to wear the collar with dignity. How it go down? Black is beautiful. I said, sing it out loud. Black is beautiful. So slave mentality. Higher.
Love is beautiful. Love is beautiful.
Oh, 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 oh. I hope you don't misunderstand me now. I'm not comparing us with anyone. I'm only saying that people that we are should never feel ourselves inferior. The Lord above who made the night and day has given both their equal parts to play. Now if you are on our side, open your mouth and sing it with pride. Let me hear you sing.
Love is beautiful.
Sing it out loud.
Love is beautiful.
Say I'm black and proud. Lift your head like me. You have to wear me call out with dignity. Oh, it go now.
Love is beautiful.
Sing it out loud.
Love is beautiful.
I'm black. It's high time that we get rid of that old slave mentality. And let me hear you say,
Love is beautiful.
look at the glass.
Love is beautiful.
It's a texture, of course. And lift your head like me. You got to wear the collar with dignity.
My name
Very good evening to you. Good night to some of you. Good afternoon to others. Wherever you're joining us from, whatever time of day it is, welcome to Politics 101. The voice and lyrics there of Kelvin Pope, the mighty Duke, the only Calypsonian to have won the Calypso Monarch 4 years in succession. 68, 69, 70, and 71. And he won in 1969 with that calypso, Black is Beautiful, in the height of the Black Power movement, which started in the English-speaking Caribbean in 1968. It's dated to the Rodney riots in Jamaica in 1968 when our own Dr. Walter Rodney was banned from Jamaica because he wanted to teach African history at the University of the West Indies in Mona, Jamaica. They did not allow him to teach Black history there. He went to the street corners and began to teach Black history there. The government panicked. He left, went to Montreal for a Black Writers Conference. And when he came back to Jamaica and attempted to come off the plane, they told him he was persona non grata, banned from Jamaica. News got around the island that Walter Rodney was banned. The students, led by Dr. Dr. Ralph Gonzalez, who was then a student at UWI and president of the student organizations, the late Patrick Manning was also there. They all took to the streets. And when they got to the four corner, they saw a crowd in the other direction. They didn't know what the crowd was about. And they hesitated. As it turned out, the crowd was a crowd of mostly young Black men from the inner city. We now call them the ghettos. And they too said they heard Dr. Rodney was banned from Jamaica, and they were marching down to the Prime Minister's office to protest his banning. So here were students from the University of the West Indies and young people, mostly from the ghetto, mostly attached to the Rastafarian movement. And together these two groups marched to the Prime Minister's office. The rest is history. The police opened fire on them, and there was a confrontation, what became known as the Rodney riots. Properties were burned, people died, and thus began officially the Black Power movement in the Caribbean. And that was in October 1968. The mighty Duke is singing this calypso in February of 1969, winning the competition. It was in the height of the Black Power movement. And so, Black is Beautiful, one of the classics of our calypso. Welcome to all of you. Welcome to Politics 101, wherever you're joining us from. I am joining you from Guyana on the East Coast. Welcome. Welcome to all of you, whether you're joining us from Linden, where they're still cleaning up after the disaster, the flood that affected over 300 families, and which the people of Linden and their leaders have placed at the footstep of the government. Neglect, neglect. Good evening to all of you. Good evening to all of you. We come to you this evening with the teachers' strike still on, still on. There is no movement in that direction. And it's as if we have forgotten about the teachers' strike because they are not on the street, but the teachers' strike is still on. Kidaki Amsterdam has been home now for 4 or 5 days, and we are dealing with the morning after. The morning after. Good evening to you. One of the consequences of Kadaki's arrest and charge is we are now in the middle of a debate on the use of the term Negro. Hence, our program tonight is Negro Must Go. If you notice, the Mighty Duke is singing in 1969. He's not saying Negro is beautiful. He's saying Black is beautiful. He's not saying Negro is beautiful. He's saying Black is beautiful. And we want to talk tonight about this thing, this use of the word Negro in official circles in Guyana. Good evening again to all of you. Good evening. In politics, in struggle, there are what are called unintended consequences. When the government instructed the police to pick up Kidaki Amsterdam last Tuesday, a week ago, when they instructed the police to pick him up, they knew nothing about what would happen after, what would happen. Nobody could predict that Kidaki would be arrested on Tuesday, the 28th of March, 2024. And nobody could have predicted what would happen after then. Some commentators, they're disappointed that Kidaki was arrested and people were not on the streets. That was one expectation. But I am arguing human beings are not robots. You don't say to them, come on the streets, and they come on the streets. You don't say do this and they do that. Human beings are not robots. Every action has a reaction. Some reactions are predictable. Some are not predictable. When the government made the decision and they gave the go-ahead to arrest Kidaki Amsterdam, if you told them they were opening up a new front of contestation and struggle with the African Guyanese community, they would have told you go to hell. Here we are, Kidaki was arrested, and the government has to confront the disturbing presence of the African community in Guyana on what you call them officially. So let's talk. There are some things I want to say about this issue of us being called Negro and why it's still on the book, still on the books. We have to understand how the laws work. I want to start with a story. In 1983, July, there were food shortages in Guyana. Those of us who lived through that period. And the WPA decided that they were going to call a day of rest, call on Guyanese to observe a day of rest, a day of rest, to signal our dissatisfaction with food shortages. And the instructions from the party was that the day of rest is a day of rest. People stay home, including WPA activists. We should stay off the road. We should stay home. And it was quite a day, because what happened is that the minibus drivers pulled their minibuses off the road. So even if people wanted to go to work, they didn't have minibuses to go to work. But in any case, most people decided on that day they were not going to work. Guyana became a ghost town on that day. On that day, became a ghost town. Well, Buxton, the Buxtonians came knocking at our door early the morning. My brother George and I lived together, and they came knocking at the door, and they said they want to march. They want to march. They're not staying home. They're observing the day of rest, but they're not staying indoors. Well, we didn't want to make the decision, so we went to Brother UC, and we said, Brother UC, people are saying to us here, look, they're on the road, and they're ready. They say they want to march. Brother UC said, okay. And so we decided that we were going to march. And the Buxtonians came out in those days. It didn't take much. Came out, and we began to march through the village. And we got to one of the schools, the community high school, and the young people decided that they wanted to go into the school and ask the young people to come out and join the march, the children, the students. And when they got to the gate, the gates were locked. The headmistress locked the gates because she anticipated that people may want to do exactly that what the crowd wanted. So she locked the gate. Easy. The boys and girls jumped over the gate. Somewhere the other they got the gate opened. And I went upstairs to talk to the older students and to ask them to join the march. Some of the young people went downstairs, and in those days there was school garden, and they just picked reaped some of the crops that morning. I think they'd reaped tomato, and I don't know what happened. The young people went down there. We got the students out, the children out. They joined the march, and we had a massive march. About a week later, the police showed up at my house with a warrant, say that they came for my arrest. And I asked what for. And they said, I am being charged with damaging a tomato. Damaging a tomato. As it turned out, I don't know if the young people, when they went downstairs, they may have stepped on mistakenly on a tomato or two. But the police decided that that was the charge. They were going to charge me as what they call the leader of the march with damaging a tomato. I went to court, and in those days we represented ourselves. Brother Kwayana would have some legal classes with us, and he would teach us the law and teach us how to defend ourselves. We didn't bother the lawyers with what we call small cases. And when I turned up before the magistrate, her name was Miss Chinta, an Indian national. She was aghast, and she went berserk. She asked the police, what charge is this? Damaging a tomato? As it turned out, it was a charge that was there since the time of slavery. You know, the enslaved people used to sometimes damage the crop as a form of protest. And those laws remained, and I think they're still in our books. And so they charged me with a slave law. The magistrate went crazy, and she dismissed the case. But before she dismissed the case, threw the case out, She gave a tongue lashing to the police and said, you all should be ashamed in 1983 to bring a charge against somebody with a slave law. So I was set free immediately before anything. I give that story to say that on our books, there are still laws from the colonial period. The police don't necessarily go there. They don't necessarily charge you with those laws, but a lot of those laws are there. They're there on the books. So I wanted to start tonight's conversation by telling you that story, to say that there are arcane laws, laws from slavery and colonialism that are still on our books. I want you to understand that. Now, last Tuesday when Kidaki was arrested, Dion Abrams, myself, Nigel Hughes and his lawyer, the four of us were there at CID when they were moving him. As they came out, they confronted, they met us. Nigel spoke to the police, the investigators, as they call themselves, and they said they had instructions to take him over to Ramfeld police station. We got there, and they were about to book him. As they were about to book him, they had to read to him information, and they said, Kidaki Amsterdam, a Negro male. And Nigel Hughes, very quietly, in his measured way, he said, he's not a Negro, and he's not going to respond to that term Negro. And there was confusion in the room. There were about 8 policemen and women standing around, and they all looked confused. They had this blank look on their faces. And Nigel insisted that Kidaki would not respond to the term Negro. And I think they took out the term Negro and they put African American, African Guyanese. And that is what happened. No big fuss, no big quarrel. It is what C.L.R. James called the fusion of time, place, and person. We had Nigel Hughes, probably the top lawyer in Guyana. We had Kidaki Amsterdam, a well-known political activist. 2 persons. And we had this moment where the government is declaring war on social media activists. The moment, the time, and the place is the police station. The police station is a representative of the state of Guyana. So this is a setting. A top lawyer, a well-known top political activist, and the state, in the building of a state. And it is that fusion of time, place, and person. It happened that Jonathan Jackson, a congressman, a black congressman from America, the son of a famous civil rights activist, is visiting Guyana at the same time. The time is the visit of Jonathan Jackson. The place is in this police station, which is one of the seats of the state. And the person is Kidaki Amsterdam and his lawyer. And it is that fusion of time, place, and person that took something that looked benign, the use of the word Negro. I knew, all of us knew that the police used Negro. All of us knew that. I've heard that so many times. I have heard young people sometimes get confused. They don't want to say black. They're not too sure. They don't want to use the other N word. So they use the word, it was a Negro man. And in their heads, nothing is wrong with that. I knew that. And I'm sure Nigel knew that. But here was this perfect moment, the time, the place, and the person. Maybe if it were not Kidaki Amsterdam, if it was what we call in Guyana an ordinary citizen, meaning a citizen who's not well known, that it may have passed. And there's so many not well known citizens who were booked as Negroes. And it passed. But the way human beings operate, the way politics operate, is that things happen in the twinkling of an eye. Things happen like a thief in the night, out of the blues. And as C.L.R. James theorizes about the fusion of the time, the place, and the person. And then he has another element. He said the person has to have the capacity to absorb the energies. And Kidaki Amsterdam is an activist. Nigel Hughes is a top lawyer and a fighter for human rights. And so they were able to absorb the moment. I was looking on, I was there. That is what happened. Immediately, the state responded via the Attorney General. And you all know what he said. This thing has been used for 180 years. Why is Nigel Hughes raising it now? Well, I pardon Mr. Nandlal. He's a good lawyer. He's obviously a good lawyer, but he's not a scholar. He's not an intellectual. So he has not read C.L.R. James. He doesn't understand philosophy. He doesn't understand political philosophy. So he doesn't know about the fusion of time, place, and person. Something that did not happen in 180 years can happen just like this. Brother Nandlal is not an intellectual. He's bright, I am sure he is. He's a good lawyer. He's a good academic. He did well at school. He went to top schools. But an academic, you can be an academic without being an intellectual. An intellectual is someone who thinks through. Clearly, Nandlal doesn't think. You know, he chats. Blah, 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 blah. He mouth to run like if he got wear bib. Teacher George said, well, if Teacher George was alive and he hear Nandlal, he would say, oh God, boy, I got to put on bib on him, he mouth to run. He mouth to run. He runs off of his mouth. He doesn't use this. So he couldn't answer for himself that although something has been in use for 180 years, just like this, in 1 minute, something happens and it challenges something that has been happening for 180 years. And that is what has happened. When historians look back at this period, whatever happens now, and they will have to give some directive to stop officially using the word Negro. And Kedaki's name, the name Kedaki Amsterdam would be attached to it. Because it was the Kedaki Amsterdam moment that brought this thing into the forefront. And so there weren't riots on the streets. There was a riot against the use of the word Negro. And Black people, African people, will be forever indebted to Kedaki Amsterdam and his lawyer Nigel Hughes for what happens with the use of this term Negro. Poor Nandlal, as I said, cannot understand that. He's not a thoughtful fellow. He's bright, you know, he got to school, he read good books, he read law books, he's a competent lawyer, he has to be. I don't doubt that. He's not an intellectual. And there's some matters that need intellectual engagement. Nandlal does not even pretend to be an intellectual. As I said last night on another program, when Mr. Jack Dio or whatever, you know, he is, said that we in the WP are living off of Walter Rodney. And I said, I am very sure that Jack Dio has never read one paragraph of what Walter Rodney had written. I am certain of that. He's not an intellectual. He's not what we in the village would call a bright person. You know, he would say he's a schoolboy, but not a bright person. These are not bright people in the sense that these are not people who think about politics. Because if you think about politics, if you think about development, you would not take the kind of actions that they're taking. You are afraid that David Hinds and Clive Thomas and Kidaki Amsterdam and Takuma Ogunse are helping to socialize a new thinking in Guyana. And what you do, you throw them in jail. Rather than say, let me engage these men. Let me engage them because they're coming with ideas. They're talking about cash transfer. They're talking about revolutionizing the state. Let me engage them at that level. But clearly, Nandlal and Jack Dio and them, that's not their interest. They govern through fear and intimidation rather than engaging citizens who are thinking these things through. And so Nandlal's response was the typical blah, 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 blah. Saying that they don't think that I am an Indian man. I belong to a government that African Guyanese don't like. And here is an issue that at least a couple of African Guyanese leaders are saying, this word is offensive. Let me shut up. It's not my business. No, no, no. He pushed his mouth in, not realizing how insensitive that he, an Indian man, is telling Black people you must accept being called a slave. Because that's what we've been calling you for 180 years. No, accept being called a slave. The word Negro came into being when slavery came into being. When slavery came into being, chattel slavery started in the mid-1700s in the United States of America. What was constructed was the notion of determining the value of human beings by the color of their skin. So dark-skinned people became Black. Fair-skinned people became white. The other ethnic groups weren't involved at that time. The world was on slavery, Black people being enslaved, white people, the enslavers, the color of the skin. What became later known as the color code. So it started with Black and white. The European term, the Portuguese and Spanish term for Black was Negro. And that's where the term comes from. The term Negro comes from Black. And Negro was then bastardized and it became nigger. And so nigger became the low class Black people name. And Negro was preserved for the few Black people who were able to free themselves and became what you call free people. As they became free people, they're no longer niggers, they are Negroes. So Negro was accepted by Black people as a preferable term to nigger. And so we embrace the term Negro. We can trace the word Negro to Negroid. When the world was divided into races, Caucasoid, white people, Mongoloid, yellow people, red people, Negroid, Black people. So the term was used. By the time we got into the late 19th century, early 20th century, as African people are coming out of enslavement, they're using the term Negro as a preferable term to the term nigger. the United Negro Improvement Association. That's Garvey's organization. You can't say Garvey was a fool. Garvey was perhaps the most pro-black leader of that time. But he is using the term Negro. The Negro Improvement Association, the Negro Progress Movement, the United Negro Fund. The term Negro was used. Carter G. Woodson talked about the new Negro. And this is where we are now moving on. The new Negro. But Negro was used by us because it was preferable to refer to ourselves as Negro than nigger. And some people who had begun to become uncomfortable with Negro start using the term colored. That term is still in use. I mean, non-white people who are sympathetic towards black, they talk about people of color. In the United States, they use that term, people of color, to mean black people, brown people, yellow people, and so on, people of color. So some of the black elite began using the word colored. The League of Colored People, the National Association of Colored People, NAACP. So colored and Negro were the preferable terms to be used to describe, for black people to describe themselves. By the time we get to the mid-20th century, we are moving now from the use of the term Negro and colored to the term African, Afro. We start saying Afro. We're not even to African yet. We start talking about Afro-Americans. Now, I want to point out something about Guyana. Professor Desprez, who came here, he wrote a book on race and politics in Guyana. I think he published it in the early 1960s. And he said he was stunned when he came to Guyana and the black people here were not using the term Negro. They weren't using the term colored. They were using the term African. He said he was shocked, and this is the 1950s, that Guyana, the blacks in Guyana had moved beyond Negro and colored. They were using African. He went to Black Bush Polo, and the black community they call Zambia. And the people at Zambia were calling themselves Africans. He went to Buxton, and they were calling themselves Africans. He reported this in his research, that by the 1950s, black Guyanese had stopped using the word Negro and colored. Iyusi Kwayana and H.H. Nicholson formed an organization called the African Society for Racial Equality in 1961. Not the Negro Association, the African Association. By that time, the LCP had declined, and we had moved now to ASRI. And ASRI is called African Society, not Negro Society, not Colored Society. In 1964, Kwayana forms ASCRIA, the African Society for Cultural Relations with Independent Africa. A Fijian scholar came to study race in Guyana. And he said, what amazed him about ASCRIA was Africa is named twice. The word Africa appeared twice in the name. African Society for Cultural Relations with Independent Africa. He's echoing Professor Desprez to say Guyanese by the 1950s had moved on from Negro and colored. We are calling ourselves Africans. We are naming our organization Africans. By the late 1960s, with what Kwayana launched, the Cultural Revolution, one of perhaps the only place in the African diaspora, in the so-called Americas and the New World, we are leading the rest of the diaspora in giving our children African names. Kwame and Kofi Kwayana leads the way in 1964 when he changed his name from Sidney King to Eusi Kwayana, which in Swahili means Black Man of Guyana. And that opened the way for our children to begin to take African names. Some of the brothers and sisters changed their names. Some, as when their children were born, they got names. Professor Kimani Nehusi wrote what is called a naming book. And we had two of them in Buxton. They were the African names and their meanings. One was at Kwayana's house, and there was a copy at our house, where me and my brother live. And people would get a baby, they would come, they go through the book, they'll choose the name. And I understand copies of the book were in other villages. So we moved on from Negro and colored to African from as far as the 1950s. Now, why is it that 70 odd years later, Africa, Negro is still being used in an official state agency like the police? Why? When we have moved on from its usage, we move from Negro and colored, we move to Afro and African, and the Black Power movement, we throw in black. And by the time we get to the 1980s, it's full African Guyanese. So Afro Guyanese, black, and eventually African Guyanese. Black is a political term because black is a derivative of what we call the color code. Because slavery started with black and white. And now, where do you fit in Asians? Asians from India and Pakistan and so forth. You have to fit them on the color line. So we began to call them brown people. Where do you fit in Japanese and Chinese? So we began to call them yellow people. Where do you fit in our native Indians? And we call them red people. So you now have the color code. So black is a political term, whereas African and Afro and Negro are cultural terms. So when one says one is an African Guyanese, we are talking about our cultural heritage as African people coming from the African continent. When we say black, we are turning slavery, a slave connotation, we are turning it on its head. We have always done that. They say black means ugly. I saw some of you are saying that black is beautiful. And we say, well, if you're saying black is ugly, you're using our color to say we are ugly. Walter Rodney says we are going to use our color to assert our humanity. So we say black is beautiful. So that's why we still call ourselves black. Black was used derogatorily during slavery. And as we always do, we take the derogative and we turn it into the positive. So when the young people today say, what's up, my nigger? They don't nigger for them. They're not using nigger in the slave way, in the derogatory way. They're using nigger as a form of endearment. Endearment. When I was a boy, the worst curse you could get is when they call you, you're a nigger man, which means you're good for nothing. Those people back then understood these terms. Martin Carter said, I come from the nigger yard. He didn't stop there. He said, I come from the nigger yard of yesterday. And to the world of tomorrow, I turn with my strength. So I ain't taking nigger into the world of tomorrow. I come from the nigger yard of yesterday, leaping from my oppressor's hate and the scorn of myself. I want to recite. I ain't reading. As you all know, I know Martin Carter, left, right, and center. I come from the nigger yard of yesterday, leaping from the oppressor's hate and the scorn of myself. And to the world of tomorrow, I turn with my strength. So Carter references the nigger yard to throw out the nigger yard, leaping from the oppressor's hate and the scorn of myself. I turn to the world of tomorrow with my strength. I turn to the world of tomorrow as an African, not a nigger. Why did the term Negro remain? And we must ask the question, why did the C word that is used derogatively against Indians, why the police don't refer to our East Indian brothers and sisters or Indo-Guyanese brothers and sisters? Why don't we refer to them by the C word? Why doesn't the police refer to them by the C word? Why doesn't the police refer to Amerindians by the B word? And there is a white B word that I can use here tonight. White people were called Bakra. The word was Bakra, and of course we black people, we call it Bakra. When we would hold our things in Buxton, one of the first chants we would do, we have to be done pray and ask the I think we're back. They're interfering with us tonight. They're interfering with us tonight. I think we're back. Are you all hearing me? Are you all hearing me? Please give me a sense. Are you all hearing me? I think they're interfering with us here tonight. Okay, they're definitely interfering with us tonight, but the show goes on. The show goes on. I was asking the question, why Negro is still used by the police and the B word is not still used by the police, or the C word to describe our Indian Guyanese brothers and sisters, or the B word, Bakra, to describe white people. They're no longer in usage by the police. Only the derogatory African word, Negro, is still being used by the police. There is a reason for that. And the reason for that is what we have been trying to explain to you all the last couple of years. The African situation is a special situation. Unlike the other ethnic groups, the African situation is part and parcel of the state formation. It's part and parcel of the institutions of this country. The police force was formed not to police white people. So they didn't have to give them a particular name. It wasn't formed to police Indian Guyanese. Indian Guyanese weren't here yet when the police force was formed. They just started to come as indentured laborers. Portuguese and Chinese, no. The police force was formed to police Africans. It started in 1840, 1839. Slavery ends in 1838. The police force is formed. There was not a police force before. Every plantation owner was his own policeman. He was his own police commissioner. He took his own justice. The enslaved person behaved by the cut out his finger. Another slave master may cut out ears. You're not violating the law. Africans are now free in 1838. And they create the police force because they say, these people, they have now set themselves free. But we feel they cannot exist in a state of freedom because they're not full human beings. And so we have to create this thing called the Guyana Police Force to police them. So the term that was used then was Negro. So Negro enters legally into usage of the police force was born with the use of the term Negro. It meant, therefore, that as we are coming into independence, the government at independence time should have, either through an act of parliament or through a decree by the head of state, say that the term Negro should no longer be used in official circles. Especially since, as I said, Black people, African people had indicated from as early as the 1950s that they no longer want to be called Negro. And so our independence government should have put an end to it. They didn't. And if that independence government was a Black government headed by Forbes Burnham, if they didn't put an end to it, don't expect a PPP Indian government going to come in and put an end to it. Some of you will say, well, you can't now criticizing Burnham. No. I am saying that African people and the use of that word, that term, Negro, was part of the collateral damage of independence. Remember, we came to independence, it was one people, one nation, one government. We stopped thinking about Black people and Indian people and Amerindian people. We're now one nation, one people. We are creating this new people, this new person, this Guyanese person. African done. So the term Negro, we didn't address that. So we brought into this one people, one nation, we brought into it all the nastiness that was attached to us. You see, one people, one nation, one destiny is aspirational. It's a good thing because we are a multi-ethnic society and we need to create a state that includes everybody. But in trying to include everybody, we neglect to deal with the problems of the different ethnic groups. And all the different ethnic groups brought problems into independence. But Africans brought more, including the official use of the word Negro. So the new government is creating a new Guyana. They've moved on from African and Indian and Portuguese and Chinese. And so that thing remained in usage. I am arguing, therefore, that these are mistakes that you make along the way when you're trying to forge a nation from different ethnic groups. In trying to forge a nation from the different ethnic groups, we made the mistake of not looking at the particular problems and issues of the various ethnic groups. That is why at the time of independence, Amerindians' lands were taken away, and they struck at the time of independence that their land must be given back to them. It is why, while Amerindians at the time of independence got back lands that were stolen from them by the Europeans. Our East Indian brothers and sisters, having come out of indentureship, they also asked for land. They weren't given free land, they were given cheap land. African problems were more problematic because these were enshrined in the law. At the end of the 19th century, a commission found that African people in the Caribbean were entitled to land. There was massive famine in the islands of the Caribbean and in Guyana. Massive famine. People were dying. And a commission of inquiry found that they were dying because they were poor. And it recommended that land be given to them equivalent to the 40 acre and a mule that was promised to African Americans. We also were promised our acres here in the Caribbean. That was never given to us. In the 1890s, never given to us. And so the African problem was maintained, and we brought it into independence. And our new independence government felt that we should go the route of one nation, one people, one destiny, rather than several people, one nation, one destiny. That should have been our motto. Because as we said, several people, then we would have been able to look at the baggage, the problems that each ethnic group brought. As I said, the Amerindians took care of the land problem at independence. East Indians had dealt with the land problem long before. African people, we were the collateral damage of one people, one nation, one destiny, that today they're calling one Guyana. So we moved on. And here we are in 2024, when we have come full circle, where Africans are now realizing, but wait a minute, we are now second-class citizens because the present government is making no bones about what it wants. It wants to bring Black people, African people, into the PPP as second-class citizens because it wants to create an East Indian state. And in order to create an East Indian state, you have to get rid of the Africans and the African franchise. So if you bring Africans into the PPP, but keep them as second-class citizens, you have a one-party state, but a one-party state that is controlled by East Indians. You see what's the plan for Africans? Look at the Africans who have gone into the PPP. Not one of them made it into the highest decision-making, the 15-member executive. Not one. Because they're not brought into the PPP to wield power. They're brought into the PPP to exist as second-class and third-class citizens. So it is the plan that they have for us that is now making Black people wake up, and that the spirit moved in brother Nigel. Nigel had been thinking about this before. Ghana Day Committee in 2016 wrote to the government asking them to stop using that term Negro. No, the government didn't pay attention. The rest of us didn't support Ghana there. But no, the spirit moved in brother Nigel Hughes. The government is seeking to destroy black activists like Kidati Amsterdam. And the spirit moves in brother Nigel. And the issue now is on the table. That is how politics work. That is how society works. And so the government and the state have to contend with it now. It is why that Nandlal can give that simplistic answer. It was used for 180 years. Do you know why it was used for 180 years? Does using it for 180 years mean that it is right? Our African people were enslaved for 200 and odd years. Does that mean slavery was right? Our Indian brothers and sisters were held under indentured servitude from 1838 to 1917, 79 years. Does that make it right? And that is why I'm saying these Nandalal chaps, they read books, they read law books, and so, but they're not bright people because they don't think. They don't arm themselves with history. They don't arm themselves with the tools in which you use your intellect. That is why you all send people like me to school. All of us, they sent to school. But some of us had the good fortune of going far, as we say, going far in school. And some of us had the good fortune of being educated at a certain place, certain universities. We had certain lecturers. I went to school at Howard University. Howard is considered the black equivalent of Harvard. In fact, Howard was created to produce the black equivalent of the white man, which wasn't a progressive thing. They weren't not what Howard was to produce, the black equivalent of the white man, not an African. And it took black students led by Stokely Carmichael and others during the Black Power movement in the 1960s. They took over Howard University and forced changes that Howard is now a pro-African university. It wasn't always that. And I was able to go to the new Howard. And when you go to a university like Howard, to these what they call HBCUs, whether you're doing history, psychology, science, whatever you're doing it through a black lens. Your professors are teaching you through the black lens. And so you get an education like everybody else, but you get an education that's influenced by the African perspective. And also, and UWI and has evolved in that regard. After the Rodney riots, you could go to UWI and you get a black education if you want it. And so, therefore, Nandalal would go to the same UWI or wherever he's been. He's not interested in a black education. That is not his interest. But it is the interest of we African people to get an African education, to come back into our community, and to help to lift our community out of the backwardness of enslavement and colonialism. And so when people tell us, don't deal with race, don't deal with black, what they want is for Negro to remain in use. Because what a black scholarship and a black activism mean is that we are digging up and digging out things like Negro. And if they continue to make our young people believe that they are Negroes, then it's easy to mess with the mind of a Negro than to mess with the mind of an African. And as I stood there when Brother Nigel said in his very calculated, very even-tempered tone, I could never do it, he could do it, when he said, He's not a Negro. He's an African guy, and he's not going to respond to that. All kinds of thought began to fly through my mind, including the fact that I said, I am justified in dedicating this period of my activism to trying to give Black people some consciousness. And I'm justified. So that when the news hit the public that Negro is being challenged, the next 2 days I am driving along the road in Buxton, and a truckload of police hailed me, and they're usually very courteous and cordial, and I hail them back, and they say, "Black is beautiful," and they say, "Dr. Hinds, drive carefully." These are policemen who were yesterday booking people as Negroes, and now they're saying Black is beautiful. Understand, I want comrades and brothers and sisters, I want us to understand that sometimes we think we are not making progress, but we are making tremendous progress because we are forcing the state to engage our issues. Nandalal and the PPP will not liberate us. That's not their interest. Even Black governments that we put in power don't liberate us. The answer, of course, is not to go and become second-class citizens in another government. I saw a former cricketer today, defending the PPP, and my stomach sick. I don't mind people being members of it. I got friends who are Black people in the PPP. You have every right to join a party, but I look at the young man. He barely understands. He can barely pronounce the words them properly. And a young man that I admire when he was a cricketer. But there is he sitting down and thumbing his nose at Black people because he probably getting some contracts to get a couple dollars. And we've always had that type. And what I am concerned about is to prevent the masses of Black young people from going down that route. We are never going to be able to stop all our people from being willingly allow themselves to be shackled. This time, it's not about shackling their feet and their hands. It's about shackling their mind. And when I look at that young man today, as I was scrolling through and the thing came, I said, look how this young man, who had the privilege of representing our country in sport at the highest level, look how he is allowing his mind to be shackled. And our task is to prevent the majority of our people from willingly allowing themselves, their minds to be shackled. So here we are. The term Negro must go. I understand that Lal is walking back a lot of what he's saying. I didn't say so. I didn't mean this. I agree. I am now for. I understand that's his latest thing. That he's now for the removal of the word Negro, but he thinks that Nigel Hughes tried to score political points. Nigel Hughes didn't try to score political points. If there are political points to be had, to be had from what Nigel did, it's the political parties. Nigel did the work. The political parties will benefit from it. One can sit here and say the political party should have done this. The PNC should have taken out the word Negro. But the PNC is not interested in that. They never were. PNC is interested in votes. And you all know my argument and quarrel with the PNC now is that at this moment, you all got to pull back the 100% interest in vote and make it a 75% at least, a 75% interest in vote and a 25% interest in protecting vulnerable Africans from being put back into first-class citizens, second-class citizenship. Political parties will benefit when we, the revolutionaries, when people like Nigel Hughes, the revolutionaries, bring these things out into the open, and force the state to respond. Yes, somebody will benefit politically. Not Nigel Hughes. Nigel Hughes wasn't acting there as a politician, as a party leader. He was acting as a revolutionary, a counselor, because he's not just an ordinary lawyer. He was acting as a revolutionary lawyer, representing a revolutionary and asking for revolutionary change as it relates to talking about and describing African people in Guyana. It was not Nigel Hughes that brought Jonathan Jackson to Guyana. It is the PPP. They brought Jonathan Jackson to Guyana. They were hoping that Jackson would have come here and skinny BT on black people. They were hoping that they would have put PPP eyes in his head and take out his African eyes. Because of the contempt they have for us African people. That they are able to buy a few Africans in Guyana, they feel they could have bought Jonathan Jackson. And Jonathan Jackson said, oh no, I'm here and I got family here. I'm here and I have family here. And somebody wrote that stupid letter saying he must look after what's happening in Chicago and all that nonsense. The charter of the Black Caucus says that the Black Caucus must witness for African people throughout the world. When we met last year with Brother Hakeem Jeffries, I reminded him of that. Those of you who were there would remind me saying that the charter of the Black Caucus, I teach the charter of the Black Caucus. So that's something that I think, this is a thing that I teach. One of my majors, my PhD majors, was Black politics, as it was called at that time. I think they know how they've changed it to African American politics. By that time, it was Black politics. It was my major. Black politics, international relations, and comparative politics. So these are things that I don't guess about. These are things that I teach. I study. The Black Caucus Charter. The Black Caucus Charter empowers the Black Caucus members to witness for Black people all over the world. That is why the Black Caucus was heavily involved in the anti-apartheid movement. They were heavily involved in this situation, are still heavily involved in what's happening in Haiti. And we have sounded the bell that in Guyana, you could have another Haiti and another South Africa on your hands. We are saying this to our brothers and sisters, our family. We are saying it to our family. And so they brought that young man here believing they could put what in the eye, spit in the eye. And he turned on them and embraced his family. He embraced his family. That is where the concept of Pan-Africanism comes from. Pan-Africanism assumes that we are one nation, Black nationalism. We are one nation in different nation states. We have a similar heritage and we have a similar experience of enslavement. Hence, we are Pan-Africanists. Hence, we are family. And what the PPP has been trying to do is to try to tell some of you all, forget about Black people. David Hinds don't speak for you. They want to tell you who must speak for you. I will dare not tell Indian people that Jack Dio mustn't speak for them. I would prefer somebody else if I were an Indian. But if Indians choose Jack Dio, I have to respect that. And Jack Dio does speak for Indians. He may not speak for 100% Indians, but he does speak for enough Indians to be an Indian leader. And I will never tell Indians or tell Jack, you don't speak for Indians. Why the hell are you telling me who I will speak? And David Hinds worked for the government and not for one moment he ever tell the government to do anything for Black people. Damn liar. I don't want to get going on him. I gave him a tongue lashing already last week, and that's enough to last for a year. But he know damn well that whether it's PPP, PNC, coalition, or who, I don't play with the dignity of black people. He knows that. He knows that. And so here we are, brothers and sisters. This Negro thing gotta go. It gotta go. And I'm prepared to join people on the streets to demand if they only decide to balk on this issue. A few years ago, we said we wanted the 1823 monument at Parade Ground. They put up on the seawall. Joke in a way. This time, we are saying Negro gotta go. And if it doesn't go, I am prepared to be part of a mass movement that take to the streets of this country and don't come off until it goes. I don't have to wait on the PNC to do that now. This is a matter that we black people and our organizations need to get up and get. And it is good to see last night there was a discussion, and it was good to see people like the president of the TUC on that program, because I think people like those need to speak up for blackness. Yes, you're a trade union, you're a black man. And it was good that they didn't have people like myself and so on who normally speak up but bring out other issue, other people, so that they can confront this issue. And then later on, Brother Rickford Burke had his program. He had Nigel Hughes, Brother Slow, and myself on. But you know, in this program, you never get a chance to say everything. And I wanted last night to give the history of the word Negro, what I did tonight, and to say why it has slipped under the radar. It has slipped under the radar because we are trying to build this new nation. And we made an error in believing we could build a new Guyana, one Guyana, and ignore the different ethnicities. If Burnham had said, take Negro off, they would lynch him. So I understand why he didn't pay too much of attention to that. I understand. I'm not castigating Burnham. But Burnham's grandsons and daughters now in the PNC have to realize that this time they have to pay attention to race. And I know they have their Congress now and they are singing the la 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 and so on and you know, the chop, you know, and so on. Once they finish their Congress, I'm going to be on their case. If you want to talk about East Indian problems, talk about the problems of sugar, talk about the problems of rice, because Indians are in those industries. Talk about the problems, if there are any, in the business sector. East Indians are there. If you want to talk about Portuguese problem, talk to Portuguese about business. They're there. If you want to talk about Amerindian problems, talk about the problems Amerindian face in the hinterland. The challenge of living in the hinterland away from the coast. Where we coastlanders go in and take advantage of the people, your children. You all know the story, it's all over the news. Those are the issues. All young girls are at the mercy of politicians. As you can notice with the other young girl who is East Indian, who came out against the minister alleging that he raped her. But Amerindians suffer more in that regard than other groups. Talk about those issues when you want to talk about Amerindian issues. Talk about the way Amerindians are being thrown around, their money that is coming from carbon credit that's not given to them. Black people don't get carbon credit money. So that's not our issue. When you come to talk about black people issue, you have to talk about wages and salaries by the government because our people are public servants. You have to talk about the state of our village economy because our village economy has been decimated. You have to talk about the renewal of agriculture in the African Guyanese community because it's been decimated. You have to talk about the social challenges that we have, like being called Negro. East Indians are not called by the police by the C word. Amerindians are not called by the B word. And that is why I'm saying my brothers and sisters in the PNC have to get bright and can't talk about all of us in one swoop, because you end up talking about none of us. You go to each group, and each group has its peculiar problem. We have the problem of being called a Negro. That's not an Amerindian problem. Nobody call Amerindian by the B word. The police don't. In official circles, when they're booking, not and Mr. Joseph Pereira, a B Guyanese, you don't hear that. We black people have our peculiar problems. East Indians have their peculiar problems. Amerindian, Portuguese, Chinese, etc. And we have to disaggregate the issues. And the problem our politicians have is that they're lazy, because it's laziness. Instead of taking time and disaggregate the problems, all people are suffering. What kind of stupid laziness is that? All people are suffering mean no people are suffering. Because you're not able to talk about the sacrifice, the suffering of each group, and how this government treats each group. Indian boys, you all have the story there online. The Indian boy cussing black people blue. Tell you go poison them, you gonna this. Do you see the police going after him with cybercrime? No. No. African, look at the cybercrime they've gone after us with. Every time you open your mouth and you say all people are suffering, no. The cybercrime law is used disproportionately against black people, and we have to repeal that law. And I am not talking with water in my mouth. It's the coalition government who enact that law. And we have to tell our leaders when they're wrong, so that when we put power in their hand another time, they don't do stupidness with it. It is the coalition government said it was wrong, that put that law into effect. And it is a colossal mistake, because it's used now against their own people. But I'm not fighting them. I'm fighting those who are using the law. No. I just need them to know that David Hinds is not a damn fool, that I'm going to talk as if some of the other, I can't say it's the coalition. Yes, the coalition put the law in effect. And they were wrong to do it. They were stupid to do it. And they ought not to do things like that again. When they have power, they must, when they're enacting laws, your first line of defense is to defend the people who are vulnerable, especially those who help to put you in power. Don't put laws in effect that will put them in harm's way of you doing now. Under the cybercrime law, you call a man a jackass, he can come after you. But the important thing is that it is this government that is using it in the most terrible way. The coalition put it in effect, but the coalition didn't use it in the way the PPP is using it now. And so I must put my attention and my energies on the PPP, because they are the ones who are using it that way. So sisters and brothers, I hope you all get the full picture now. And now it is our marching orders. Be prepared to come onto the road if this government does not stop the usage of Negro in official circles. It must stop. Or if it's not stopped, I am prepared to join others who take us on the road to demand this. We come in peace as always. We don't seek to break up this country because this country belongs to me. I don't want, when the PPP is voted out, that we inherit a broke up country. So I ain't telling black people to broke up Guyana. I also don't want when we inherit power, electoral power from the PPP, that we have broken black people, broken psychologically, broken economically, broken socially, broken politically. And so therefore, I want black people to fight now. Don't want you to break up the country. But I also don't want you to become meek. You must fight. And how you fight, how we fight, will be determined by the reaction of the government, but be determined by our leaders and the strategies and tactics that they use. They must get the analysis right. If they don't have the analysis right, then they will not get the action right, or they will get no action at all. We come tomorrow, Brother GHK Lal is going to be here. On Wednesday, we're going to be talking about an issue that is very prevalent in our community across race and class, and that is the issue of mental health. I have a young African brother who is a mental health expert. He's here on Wednesday, and we're going to be talking about mental health because we got to talk about some of these issues that are eating away at our community. So we're going to be talking about the health issues, mental health issues, and how that ties in to politics and society. As usual, I love you all. As we say in Guyana, I love you all bad. Bad, bad. Unconditionally, but not uncritically. Unconditionally, but not uncritically. For those of you who are in Antigua, I will be on Twin Island Media in the morning, tomorrow morning. Twin Island Media. We're going to be talking about what's happening in South Africa. As you all know, the ANC, the party of Mandela, the party that freed African people in South Africa from apartheid, it has lost its majority. It went from 70% of the vote in 1999 to 40%. Intabeniba, Mekwashiba, take notice. The ANC now has 40% of the vote. It has now to look for coalition partners. A breakaway party by former President Zuma got 15%. A breakaway party by the former youth leader Malema got 10%. If you add the 40% by the ANC, 15% by Zuma, and 10% by the Economic Freedom Fighters, as Malema Party is called, are you counting for me? That's 65%. That's ANC vote 65%. But the ANC is reduced to 60 because they're not looking after the issues of black people in South Africa. The highest unemployment rate is in South Africa. The highest unemployment rate in the world. And this is 30 years after apartheid. 30 years. Neglect to deal with the particular problems of black people. Neglect. And they're now down to 40% from 70%. The black people manage them. They didn't go and join the white man party. They didn't go to the Democratic Alliance. They went to the breakaway African party. Intabeniba, Mekwashiba, take notice. I say no more. So, as you all know, we although we have our problems in Guyana, some of us have to pay attention in what's happening in the rest of the world. And so I'll be on Twin Island Media in the morning in Antigua talking about what's happening in South Africa. It's always wonderful to take a little break sometimes. I see my brother Richard Munsami is on tonight. He's well, I can call him. I call him is what we call in Arizona, my Kulibai friend. And we have that kind of bond. Brother Munsami, good evening, my brother. He says we need to figure out the way how to work together, all ethnic groups. We need to stop this sort of politics that we're playing, group against each other. I agree with you. You and I have had years of that debate. But as I always say to you, Richie, it's more than just talking it. You know, we have to do it, and we have to have committed leaders who are committed to do it. Right? We are for power sharing. We want to share power with all ethnic groups. Jack Dio said the PPP is not prepared to share power. What he means is that as leader of Indian people ought not to share power with African people. I can't change Jack Dio. Is you all East Indian people of reason and courage who have to get Jack Dio to come off that high horse. African leaders, almost all of us, have embraced the notion of a power-sharing national government. The hold-up is and the PPP. So it's good to see you, Brother Richie. I know you called me a couple of times, but you know when you buy there in Guyana, I get busy. But I'll touch base with you shortly. Keep the fire burning in Arizona while I'm gone. Because if I come back and things go wrong, it's you are coming for. Richard Munsami, my good friend from Arizona, on here tonight. Thank you all so much. And those of you who've contributed to the Kedaki Defense Fund, my goodness, I still have some people to thank who have sent in their donations since Friday. And I forgot. Tomorrow, those of you who I have forgotten to thank, I will do so tomorrow. Meanwhile, the fund is still open because they're talking about more charges against Kedaki. They're talking about going after the WPA. We have to set ourselves right. And thank you all, ordinary people, folk, the salt of the earth, for contributing to our defense fund. I'm going to see you all tomorrow. My Indian Guyanese brother, Mr. J.H.K. Lal, is going to be here tomorrow. And you know, when that brother is firing, he's firing from the hips. See you all tomorrow, same time, same place. They can't stop the show because we have a date with destiny. I'm quoting from C.L.R. James. And no, that's not C.L.R. James. C.L.R. James said, rendezvous with freedom. It is Dr. Martin Luther King who says, we have a date with destiny. We do. We have a date with destiny.